Thank you for tuning in to the YSPN project. Don't miss out on future episodes. Be sure to follow us on Spotify, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Just search YSPN to stay connected with our upcoming physical events in Australia and New Zealand, virtual events, interviews, and much more. See you in the next podcast.
Hi everyone, welcome to the YSPN podcast. Today I have Daizy Maan with me. Daisy, welcome to the YSPN podcast. You've got this incredible tapestry of life, startups, human rights, the Himalayas, boardrooms. How do you sum up yourself when you just got like 30 seconds to make an impression?
Okay, that's so tricky. I think I normally tell people, I normally start with laughter. So I will tell them I do a little bit of comedy, and that often piques people's interest more than just a typical professional role. But yeah, I don't have a direct answer for you for that 30 seconds, but I can tell you about what I do though.
Yes, we do.
So I run Australian South Asian Centre, which is a nonprofit community group, membership-based organisation to amplify, empower, connect Indian, Pakistani, South Asian women who are creatives, who are founders, who are professionals. We have about 170 members now and about 3,000 subscribers. That's been running for 4 years.
Wow.
I originally did that voluntarily for about 2-3 years, and then recently I've let go of my full-time day job to do it full-time. Underneath Australian South Asian Centre, we have creative productions, and our largest one that most people are familiar with is Brown Women Comedy, which is going to be the largest lineup of Indian South Asian women comedians in Australia, with almost 3,600 people coming along to shows last year. So it's not just an ordinary comedy show. It's about tackling shame and stigma and things that are taboo through the medium of comedy. We market it as Meet Australia's, most bare-shitted South Asian women comedians.
So let's rewind it a bit. How did you start this? What was that one moment, or what was that one phase that made you think that, yes, this is what I want to do with my life, and I want to pursue this path?
I think I was working for 6 years before managing and setting up university accelerator programs. I did that for Deakin University, and I also was the interim program manager for Melbourne University's Melbourne Accelerator Program. So I have been involved in the startup space through an education, in an educational way for 6 years. And I started that job, I started in management at the age of 23. Like I was 22 when I sort of got the gig, and then after 23, they asked me to manage the university's entrepreneurial programs. They were extracurricular, they're not academic. I'm not hugely an academic person, but I love practical, hands-on things. So I was in that space for 6 years, and I loved being in that space. But I had some questions because, for example, one of the universities I worked at had the largest number of Indian international students in the entire country, about 4,000. Yet not many of them were successful in our accelerator program or even applying. It wasn't even that they were successful. They weren't even applying. And then I really started to think about, the diversity of people, particularly ethnic diversity of people coming through, getting these opportunities, and who's not, who are we shutting out? And then in the end, we made some slight adjustments to the accelerator to make it more accessible. There were some very simple ways to do that. And then that started to improve. But I also started to just notice the lack of Indian women in, I guess, leadership roles, whether it's in startups or whether it's in creativity or social impact, because social impact is where my passion is. And I went on a trip to London, and I just saw this thriving community of like brown creatives, grassroots, helping each other out, some working in film and television, some, in writing books, some who are founders, all coming together and like supporting each other without it being some like, this is the government doing a multicultural thing. Like it felt genuinely grassroots and like they owned it. And I thought, oh my God, I really want to move here to be in this community, because Australia feels like we're 20 years behind this. And then COVID happened and I couldn't move. So then I was like, what's the second best thing? Why don't I start something like that here to like accelerate the pace of change so that we have greater representation, but not just representation. It's about values aligned representation. I think representation is a first step, but it's really important to have that alignment in values. So I'm really passionate about that.
Obviously, it's great to have everyone aligned with your values and what you're trying to create. And I'm pretty sure this must not be easy for you. What are the challenges you face on a daily life basis, and how do you deal with them?
Yeah. I think How do I deal with them? That's a good question. Do I deal with them? Is a better. Do I deal with them? uh, um, I think in my previous role, I got to a stage where I didn't really feel like I was being challenged enough. Like it got repetitive. It was very rewarding and I loved it. We were making an impact with thousands of students, helping them develop their entrepreneurial skills. But for me, I am the sort of person that likes like big, hairy goals and achieving them and having an impact from that and seeing the tangible impact that comes from that. And I also like variety. So not everybody's like this. Some people like, stability, consistency, reliability in their work. I like a new, fresh challenge. If you have me doing the same thing every day, I will be bored. So I think there's challenges, but I also take sort of radical responsibility. No one but me chose this path. So I think part of that is like reframing. Sometimes when I'm really frustrated with something, there's so much to do and I'm just so stressed out. I'm just I'm like, why is this happening? Like, how come? And I'm like, this isn't happening to me. I chose to do this. I chose to put myself in this situation because I am the sort of person that likes ambition and achievement, but also impact and seeing what it does for the community. Yeah, I think that gets me through knowing that I like the impact it has on people and I like that we're able to change people's perspective. Like, for example, the medium may change. Like at the moment, it's comedy and ASAC. In the past, it was entrepreneurial programs. Before that, I've done other things. The medium, I think, may change from time to time, but the overarching pattern I'm finding is I find it incredibly rewarding when we're able to inspire people, when we're able to shift their perspective on the way that they think about something to a way that's more inclusive. And yeah, like just helping people see themselves and see that they have the capacity to do the things that they want to do.
So, Daisy, your curiosity has taken you to some places: Spain, Thailand, Tanzania, India. What's a memory from that time that still hits you when you think about it?
Oh my God, there's so many memories. I think those sort of 4 countries have made me who I am in terms of I did a lot of my travel before the age of 25, about before 24. Spain, I lived in for 5 months. I turned 18 there. I did my student exchange. It was so hard to convince my parents that I wanted to go there. Like they just absolutely refused. So I worked at a call center all summer on like, I don't know, $15, $20 an hour doing outbound telesales to save up enough money to get to Spain because I wanted to learn a third language and I managed to learn Spanish almost fluently. I did work really, really hard on that in about the first 3 months, but I really immersed myself in the local culture. I think one of the memories from Spain, I might share 2 memories with you from one from another country, but from Spain is that I remember being there and I remember really struggling with the language. And I was still in touch with my friends back home. And there were a couple of other amazing girls there from Australia. I was hanging out with them. And then I realized I did not fly halfway across the world to not learn this language and to spend my entire time with 2 other Australian exchange students from Australia. So then I actually had to make this hard decision where I was like, I was only 17. I was about to turn 18. I was like, no, I'm going to spend my entire time with local Spanish people. I'm going to go to 15 hours of Spanish classes. I'm going to enroll myself into any extra spare classes there are on top of the fact that I was going to high school every day. And I was just amazed at what one could learn when you really push yourself, because in 3 months I was almost fluent with Spanish and I can still speak it conversationally now. And I didn't think that was possible. But when you really immerse yourself, like I wasn't calling friends back home anymore. I wasn't hanging out with the Australian girls anymore. As much as I love their company, I had limited that like to once every couple of weeks. And I was doing extra on top of school, extra classes. I really, through immersion, picked up the language. I also lived with a family that didn't speak any English, so that helped. So that was Spain, where I realized when you just put yourself into a situation where you're forced to learn something, you're going to learn it faster than when it's just a hobby, you know? Thailand, Thailand, I was working with refugees and asylum seekers. I was 19 years old. I got a placement and I was so fortunate for that because it was under a DFAT, used to have a program called Australian Youth Ambassadors for Development. It still exists, but now it's called Australian Volunteers International. But Australian Youth Ambassadors for Development, they used to send a few hundred volunteers abroad every year. DFAT took care of your flights and your accommodation, but you weren't paid for your work. And so I was placed with an agency working on with asylum seekers and refugees in Bangkok. And I just learned so much. I think a memory is I was studying law school at the time, and I had these very idealistic, like I had these ideas on how human rights law works, and because we'd studied everything, and you know, there's beautiful treaties to protect people, and then you just go into reality. And I was so fortunate that happened to be at 19 rather than I waited till the end of my law degree. And I just realized, I'm like, wow, it's so much more complicated. And for example, I remember getting them being so confused that Thailand is actually not a signatory to the key treaty related to giving refugees rights. But yet that is the center where it's all processed. Like all of the refugees come to Thailand because the UNHCR has a headquarters there. And I was like, how does that make sense? And so a lot of it was a lot more informal, the support and all of what we had to do. So that was, I remember, a realization where I'm like, where my academic knowledge is useful, but it's not directly applicable the way I thought it was. So a lot of my friends that were still doing law didn't really dive into that full-time legal work until the end of their degree. They waited till they finished. Whereas I did this after 1 year of law school. Like I took time off and off I went to Thailand and immersed myself 3 months working full-time, albeit voluntarily. And I was like, oh, this is what it is. And as much as I loved it, my entire career trajectory changed after that because I realized I didn't want to do law. And so I came back and changed out of my law degree. When I was in Thailand, we worked, that was where my seeds of entrepreneurship were planted because there was a group of Tamil Sri Lankan women who they didn't have any jobs. They came as refugees and they had been in Thailand for 5 years, and their plight was just, it just would make me, I would feel so much for them because some of them were living in like 5 people per room, and most of them were widows, and some of them had small children, and a lot of them didn't speak Thai. And Thailand isn't a country where you can get by often just with English. Like you need to speak Thai, unless you're working, obviously, like I was working in an office with English speakers. And the agency decided to do a program for these women to help them learn micro entrepreneurial skills. And they said, does anybody want to help adapt the curriculum that we've been using in a different country to make it suitable for Thailand? And nobody put their hand up, and I was like, I'll do it. I was 19 years old. I don't know what the hell adaptive curriculum means, but you know, wherever it was in a curriculum from Kenya that was used by the International Labour Organization, I remember this. Wherever it's in Kenya, I crossed down, wrote Thailand. Wherever it's in Swahili, I wrote down Thai. Wherever it's in rural, I wrote down urban. And then I was like, I looked at some things and I'm like, well, that won't work in Thailand. I just used some common sense, and I was like, look, I've done my best. And then the manager was like, yeah, sure. Do you want to see us implement this program? And that was the first time I saw that we taught sort of, you know, the Sri Lankan Tamil women. I didn't do the teaching. We had local folks do the teaching, but they were taught micro entrepreneurial skills. And I just saw how much that restored their sense of hope and dignity when they had an income, because all they wanted was a job, but they couldn't get a job because they didn't have the visa status. But it was almost like it was kind of like a loophole. But if they were entrepreneurial, and we as the expat community could support by providing sort of a market for their goods, and like linking them to a market and training them in micro entrepreneurial skills, it gave them this sense of dignity and hope. And they started to like get health insurance for their kids. They started to like put their kids into Thai school. They started to integrate into the community. And that was when I realized the power of like just micro entrepreneurial skills in terms of teaching you how to be resourceful, connecting you to a market. It just helps you be quite resourceful and have agency over your life. But that was my very long answer to the two sort of memories I had from Thailand and Spain.
No, actually, all you need is a push. I completely agree with you. And tying back to your story, I had a similar experience where I was working for a company in India, and the manager quit. We had to do like a project in Kenya, and the manager quit. And overnight, I was made the manager. I was like, either they told me I have to go to Kenya for 6 months and implement this project. I'm like, I have no idea how I'm gonna do, but it's like you should just jump into the
You
water.
probably, was that the period where you learned the most in the
Yeah,
fastest
exactly.
amount? Yeah.
Exactly. You
So,
just jump into the water, trust yourself,
yeah,
and then come out swimming. That's the only way.
exactly. And like I've had this in the university space where I have had, I think in my 6 years of working in the same job, I had 9 different managers.
Yeah.
And there was like 6 months where they were trying to find me a manager, and there was these interim managers, and like no one was telling me what to do. And I just had to work out. I was like, well, these are the goals we've set out. This is our strategic plan. Here's how I'm going to do it. And I was quite an accountable person in the sense that I was quite very driven myself and probably worked harder than I needed to. But I learned so much from being put in the deep end. Like I was told, Daizy, here's an entrepreneurial program. We want you to manage it. It's got a 2 million budget over 4 years, 500,000 a year. Here's what you got. Like, you know, how do you build entrepreneurship in this university? And I would come up with ideas and I would sort of share them with my bosses, and they would sort of just, I eventually realized some of them knew less than me when it came to entrepreneurial development. And I was just a sponge. But I wouldn't have learned that much if I had a boss who just did everything for me.
Yes. So yeah, spoon feeding never works. You always got to do it by yourself.
It's
So
so interesting. I don't know. I don't know if I call it professional skills, but just skills in general. I think I have been always quite resourceful.
yeah,
Like the reason I got that job entirely, I never applied for it. I was
yeah,
volunteering, running a university. At the university, I was running a club that I started myself, that
yeah,
very few people were interested in, but I managed to get 100 students to attend our conferences. And
yeah,
that club I started at about, I think, 18 years old, and it was called Social Enterprise Collective. I started the club in my first year of uni or my second. And I was just really inspired after spending time in Tanzania and Thailand about
yeah,
this idea of social entrepreneurship and social impact. So I came back and I started that club, but that involved a lot of resourcefulness. And I
yeah,
remember when I was running the club, like we had someone to build our website. He didn't show up. So then I learned how to build websites. I remember we had someone to design our logo. They bailed. So then I went on Canva 10 years ago and taught myself basic design skills so I could make a logo for our club, and then I had to do recruitment and I learned how to use MailChimp. Those three skills I still use today every time I start a project or start an organization or start anything, right? So they're very basic skills, but like design, marketing, setting up a website, like those have been pivotal. Use those again and again. So I think underneath that is a sense of resourcefulness.
yeah.
Um,
And taking initiative as well,
yeah,
100%.
take 100%. I don't wait for someone to tell me what to do. I go and work it out. I'm like, how do we do this? Like, how do I set up this automation? I Google it, then I work it out, then I learn about Zapier, then it's about like, if you want to do things, it's not about waiting to get someone else to give you the experience. I
Yeah,
feel like in these days, it's in your hands. Go start a side hustle. And I think there's always this thing where people say, oh, I need investment to start a side hustle. Not really, no. I've started a lot of things with no investment. ASAC started with like no investment. Seco
yeah,
started with like $1,000, I think. Like the Student Society Club gave us that 1,000. But yeah, I think you we are hardwired through our education system to rely on someone external to give us our workload.
yeah,
We did that through schooling. All of our school life, our teachers told us what to do for our assignments. Then we entered the workforce and our bosses told us what to do for our jobs and when things are due. And the thing I constantly remind myself is I'm hardwired to work towards deadlines imposed on me externally. So I've really had to, on the entrepreneurial journey, you really have to get more disciplined on like, you are your only boss. If you don't do this today, no one's showing up to tell you to do it, which is an ongoing journey. Like I still struggle with it because sometimes I'm like, no one will know if I do this or don't do this. But it's like, no, Daisy, it's what you need to do to get X result. So I think entrepreneurship really teaches you about yourself. So in the corporate space, they call this intrapreneurship. There's a lot of intrapreneurs in the corporate space. They're the people starting new divisions for a company. Technically, at Deakin, I was like an intrapreneur. Like I started the entrepreneurial programs and there wasn't much guidance on what to do, but I was like, let's shake things up inside an existing institution. So I think those sort of basic entrepreneurial skills are translatable into corporate spaces called entrepreneurship. Obviously, it depends on who your boss is and whether they actually embrace that or not. But yeah, resourcefulness, taking initiative, entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship. I think those are probably the three key. The fourth is I think I'm just like communication skills. I have always worked on my communication skills. Simple things of even back when I was a waitress, I would just like practice having, when I did that when I was 16 years old, I would just practice having a conversation with someone who was sitting down, ask them about their day, trying to get them to laugh. And then they would always like leave a tip. And I was like, oh, if I get people to laugh, they'll leave a tip. So I learned how to crack jokes. I was kind of like, I was always interested in being a bit of an entertainer, I think, because I was like, I hate being bored and I hate, I don't want to be a boring person. So let's be interesting at least. And I just learned how to communicate. Started with being a waitress. Then at the call center, I had to make 300 calls a day when I was like in my, when I was 19, yeah, before I went to Spain. No, I was 17 because I was saving up to go to Spain. And you make 300 calls a day, you learn to like get more interesting because otherwise people just hang up on you.
yeah,
And I was like, no, I'm going to be the top salesperson at this call center. And I was in the end. So you kind of learn how to be more interesting. And I think it's not just interesting, but it's like communication skills. So I think for me, I'm very comfortable to have a conversation with anyone, anytime, anywhere. And I think that has served me to not be nervous, to just go talk to people from the vice chancellor to like executives, just as if we're equals.
Yeah, perfect. No, actually, I completely understand. And the thing is that taking initiative that you were telling me, information right now is absolutely free. There's nothing on the internet that you cannot find. So there's no excuses for you to not. If you set your mind to it and want to do it, you can absolutely achieve it. 100%. I agree with you. This is all of what has gone right. You're creating such a interesting space, brown women in comedy in Melbourne. What are the challenges that you face till now in that niche space, and how have you overcome those?
Um, I'm not from the arts.
Yeah.
I was not an artist before. So it's really interesting. Where I have found myself almost accidentally is in this space of events and arts. And I've also like, I'm learning a lot more about, I recently joined the board of Multicultural Arts Victoria, as well, which is one of the kind of major arts bodies here. I'm learning so much about the arts through that, through brown women comedy. Uh, what 3 years ago, it started off as just an idea. Like we were running one small event called Brown Women Comedy in a small 80-seater room. We ran it twice because it sold out. And then we thought, okay, what happens when we book a 6-seater room? Like, sorry, not six, 6 nights at 100 seats, and we sold out. And then last year I thought, what happens if we book a 180-seater room for 10 nights? And we almost sold out. So Brown Women Comedy there's been lots of challenges, but it has been a slow, progressive growth of growing bigger each year. It's not like people see it now and it's quite big and they're like, wow, how's that work? There's been like 3 to 4 years of a lot of work to get it to where it is now. I think the challenge is because I'm not from the arts, it's actually been a blessing in some way because I lean into the entrepreneurial skills I learned. And I find that sometimes in the arts, as people are really focused on being the artist, it's two different skills. I'm both performing as a comedian, but I'm also producing, which means and I'm also doing all the marketing. So I take care of marketing and producing, which it's a hard balance to be a performer as well as a producer marketer. But I had to do that because at the beginning I wasn't sure whether we'd sell 100 tickets or 1,000. So I was like, we don't have budget to hire someone, so I have to do everything. So that was a challenge. I think managing my time, staying on top of the 100 million things to do, learning new skills. Like we do a lot of ads now. Even though we have an agency, I went through advertising courses to learn to make sure like what the agency doing is good. What the agency is doing is good. I'll need to know how the lingo of Facebook ads, so things like that. I'm trying to think what else is challenging. I think it's just for me, the most challenging thing has been managing time, the balance
Yeah.
between being an artist and practicing my comedy and getting better at jokes and doing more open mics versus focusing on producing marketing. And I find that I spent 70% of my time on producing marketing and less on the being a comedian. So something has to take a toll. And I just accept that that's the case during festival period. That's what's going to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah, awesome. No, actually, and I have seen it grow as well. You have a stand-up lineup coming up as well that you wanted to tell us about.
Yeah, sure. We have shows at Melbourne International Comedy Festival and Sydney Comedy Festival, it's called. They're starting in about, I think, on the 8th of April or 9th. But we have, I think, about 20 shows, and we this year have flown in 2 comedians from India as well, Niv Pragasam and Ramya Ramapriya, and then there'll be myself, and there'll be crew Kritika Harale. There'll be 4 of us on every night. We're on at 45 downstairs in the city, as well as Fitzroy Town Hall for 2 of the nights, and then we're on at Riverside in Parramatta. And the Comedy Store, which is one of Australia's most iconic comedy venues. We've got a Saturday night there in Sydney. So the shows are an absolute riot. They're loads of fun. We've been very fortunate this year to get the support of the Centre for Australia-India Relations through DFAT to help us bring down our comedians. So yeah, we'd love your support if you want to come along. We'll also send a special discount code just to the YSPN network as well,
Wow.
because, you love a good discount. I do too. I wouldn't be Indian otherwise.
Which, having you said Indian, I actually wanted to know you are doing so much for the community here, and it's such a tight-knit community. How do you stay true to your roots while doing all of the stuff that you're already doing, like your
I
desi
think
roots?
Yeah, I think that's really easy for me because all my work is sort of based on my roots. Like brown
Yes.
women comedy, if you come to my shows, I have a few jokes in Punjabi. Like I have a few things, and most of it's in English, but I'll do a few bits in Punjabi and translate. Like I Australian South Asian Center, like I think it's interesting. The It's really interesting. I identify like I guess I'm Punjabi, and because my parents came from Punjab, and but South Asian I identify as broadly as well because I think South Asian's inclusive of Indians and Pakistanis and Sri Lankans, and a group of us that have very similar cultural values, albeit maybe different languages and different food. Culturally, we're quite united, I think. How do I stay? I don't even think that's something I think about. I think, I wrote a chapter in a little book recently called Growing Up Indian in Australia, and that's an anthology that's been published. I've got 4 pages in there, and it's about growing up in Griffith, New South Wales, and it's about mental health. It's about mental health challenges. And the question you're asking me now, I feel like back then I really struggled because
Yeah.
I was torn between my Indian identity and my Australian identity. But now that just sounds like old news to me. Like I don't even relate to that anymore because I'm so well steeped into my Punjabi roots as well as being Australian. Like I don't feel that conflict as much. But I talk about that conflict in the book a bit because I grew up in quite a town at the time where I experienced a lot of racism. This was years ago where people still called you curry muncher. I told you to go back to where you came from, all that typical stuff. And I think at that time I really struggled. But over the last 5 to 7 years, Punjabi is like my first language. It's what I
Yeah.
banter in. It's what when I think of my jokes, I think of them in Punjabi and then I write them in English. And I'm like, is that offensive? Is that not offensive? I think language learning, I am so grateful my mother taught me Punjabi. And I know not everyone has learnt it, but I feel like she forced me to speak it even when I didn't want to speak it growing up. Like my brother and I would be playing Mario Kart and my mom, well, we'd be hungry and we'd be like, Mum, we're hungry. And she just wouldn't listen. And then we would just be like, why isn't she listening? And we were like little kids. And then we're like, Mama, bhukh lagi hai. And she'd be like, Hanji putter ki chaida. And she'd come over with food. And I absolutely, I'm going to be honest, I despised her for it as a kid. I was like, why can't we just speak in English? Why did we move to Australia? Blah, blah, blah. Remember, I lived in a little countryside town where being Indian was a thing I got bullied about. So I didn't want to be Indian. And then growing up, by the time I was 17, 18, I am so grateful she forced me to speak Punjabi because my grandparents have all passed away now, but I could speak to them. I can speak to other elders. I love Punjabi banter. There's so much I love that. Language is something that's kept me close to my roots, and obviously food, and just community. ASAC is a community. There are lots of South Asian folks in our community. There are Punjabi folks, there are other folks from other parts of India and Sri Lanka, and I think that's kept me quite grounded in our community. I've gone the other way. I'm only surrounded by South Asians lately, and I'm thinking, where did all the white people go?
It's
Yeah.
just like it's the balance. You didn't have that before, and now it's too much of that. So it's absolutely inspirational that you're doing, and just keep doing the
I
amazing
think it's
work.
perfect. I think it's perfect balance.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's going to be packed out this time as well. Brown Women Comedy. So I'm wishing you all the best for that. Would you have anything for us that you wanted to shout out?
No, thank you so much for like having me. I really appreciate it. I love the YSPN community. I used to be involved years ago in the Melbourne chapter. I think I was the Melbourne chapter lead. It was during COVID. It was a rough time, I think. But I really appreciate what YSPN does. Particularly, I think one of my biggest values is seva, selfless service. That's what got me involved. That underpins all of my work. I always say seva is not just something you do on the side or at the Gurdwara. It is something you embed into your work. I think about this day in, day out about how am I serving our communities? What way am I doing it? I feel like all of my work is underpinned by seva, and that's really important to me. And I think that's a value that YSPN really embodies, and I appreciate that.
Awesome. So that's a wrap from my side. Folks, please follow Daisy on all her socials. Go watch Brown Women in Comedy. And that's it. And follow YSPN as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the YSBN project. Don't miss out on future episodes. Be sure to follow us on Spotify, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Just search YSPN to stay connected with our upcoming physical events in Australia and New Zealand, virtual events, interviews, and much more. See you in the next podcast.